Chapter 1896. Yi Qianqian was silent. She gritted her teeth and pinched his waist. Shenjilia shrank back, and the weight of his body fell even more toward Yi Qianqian. You've had so much to drink, yet you're still so frivolous. Yi Qianqian's cheeks were red. Be careful of sudden death. Give me the car keys. No, walk over. Shenjilia buried his face in the crook of her neck. His words reeked of alcohol. I just don't want to ride in the car anymore. I feel like I'll puke to death if I do. Yi Qianqian turned her head away in disgust and said, Get lost. You stink. I don't want to take the car, Shenjilia said coquettishly. Let's go. Yi Qianqian pursed her lips. In the end, she still half-supported him as they walked toward the hotel. After getting a standard room, Yi Qianqian politely declined the waiter's request for help. She helped Shenjilia into the room and finally found the room. She opened the door and threw him onto the bed. Shenjilia was thrown to the ground, and he almost vomited. He opened his eyes and looked at Yi Qianqian. His vision blurred. With a look of disgust on her face, Yi Qianqian stepped forward to help Shenjilia take off his coat. She then went to boil a pot of water for him. There was fruit juice in the fridge. He took out the sour plum juice and warmed it in the kettle. When Shenjilia was helped up to drink the sour plum juice, he was a little confused and asked, Isn't this sour plum juice? Yeah. Sour plum soup to cure the hangover? I don't know, but I know that sour plum soup can stop vomiting. Yi Qianqian helped him up and poured the plum soup into his mouth. Shenjilia couldn't drink anymore and turned his head away. My stomach is full of water. Can't you feel sorry for me? Yi Qianqian gritted her teeth and smacked him in the stomach. Shenjilia wailed and looked at Yi Qianqian pitifully. Serves you right. I need to go to the bathroom, Shenjilia whispered. No matter how Yi Qianqian heard it, this guy sounded like he was acting coquettishly. Go by yourself. What if you fall? So what if you fell? Why did you drink so much? Although she said that, Yi Qianqian still supported him and walked step by step to the bathroom. After urinating, Yi Qianqian touched his neck and realized that there was a thin layer of sweat on it. She unhappily took off his sweater and scolded, You don't know how to say it when it's hot. You might as well die from the heat. Hot. You're only telling me now? I've already taken it off. Shenjilia opened his eyes in a daze. He looked at Yi Qianqian and said, Of course not. You lied to me. Yi Qianqian was speechless. Ignoring him, Yi Qianqian took off her coat and sweater and went to take a shower. When he came out of the shower, Shenjilia was sprawled on the bed, wearing only a thin layer of clothing. His cheeks were flushed, and his breathing was even. He had fallen asleep. Yi Qianqian straightened his legs. When she finally managed to get him to lie down properly, Shenjilia turned around and slapped her to the ground. Yi Qianqian was startled and turned to look at him. She didn't know if Shenjilia was conscious or not, but he tugged on her leg. His entire body was like a buckle, and he locked her firmly in his arms. Yi Qianqian felt a little chilly and pushed him away. The blanket is under you. Get up. Shenjilia nudged her. The smell of alcohol was strong. Yi Qianqian looked away in disgust and struggled with all her might. Not only did she fail to break free, but she was also pinned down by Shenjilia. Then, the smell of alcohol was forced into his mouth. Yi Qianqian frowned and looked away. Shen. Chapter 1897. Although there was a heater in the room, the temperature was not particularly high. Shenjilia's kiss sent chills down her spine. However, he couldn't break free even if he wanted to. The drunken Shenjilia seemed to be much stronger than usual. After getting used to the taste in his mouth, it didn't seem that bad anymore. But, she was really afraid that he would suddenly vomit and dirty her. She tried to push him away, but Shenjilia's hand seemed to have eyes of its own. Even though his eyes were closed, he was able to firmly grasp her hand. He hooked his leg and pressed it between her legs. Yi Qianqian was so sensitive that she trembled. She simply gave up resisting. She reached out, unbuckled his belt, and tore his shirt open almost roughly. After not seeing him for 4 months, it was impossible for her not to miss him. Perhaps it was because it had been a long time, but Yi Qianqian didn't have a particular need for such things. It was just that at this moment, his body felt a little hot from the teasing. Shenjilia suddenly opened his eyes. His palms pushed her clothes higher, and his movements gradually became gentler. It was only then that Yi Qianqian realized what was going on. What the f***ck? Pretending to be drunk? However, it was too late now. Shenjilia pulled up the blanket and covered the two of them. Yi Qianqian's breathing became more and more erratic. I missed you. Shenjilia's voice was low, and it carried the sexiness of drunkenness. Yi Qianqian opened her eyes and saw him crawling on top of her. She looked loyal and adorable. She couldn't help but raise her head to kiss him, but Shenjilia kissed her back forcefully. The night was long, but the night was short. Perhaps it was because of the alcohol, but Shenjilia was exceptionally rough this time. Yi Qianqian almost punched him and shouted, "Slow down." Shenjilia chuckled and said slowly, "Don't worry. It won't be too soon." Yi Qianqian replied, "Yeah. You bastard." Yi Qianqian didn't know what time it was when it ended. She drifted off to sleep, only to be woken up again in a daze. Yi Qianqian was shocked. She snapped out of it and exclaimed, "What are you doing?" He wanted to close his legs, but they were immediately pried open. "Don't move. Enjoy it." When he slept, he didn't draw the curtains. When he woke up, the sky was already bright. Yi Qianqian felt that she might fall apart from the torment, but her eyes were blinded by the bright sky. She got up and drew the curtains before climbing back into bed to continue sleeping. However, as soon as he climbed up, he was hugged tightly. Yi Qianqian stiffened and warned, "If you mess with me again, I'll kill you." Shenjilia chuckled and said, "I'm done. I'm going to sleep." Yi Qianqian was infuriated by his laughter. She pushed and kicked him, but that wasn't enough. She bit down on his neck. Shenjilia screamed, "Aya, murder." Yi Qianqian didn't exert much force. When she heard him scream so miserably, she immediately let go. "Bah! Bah!" Shenjilia hugged her tighter and whispered, "Aren't we going to sleep?" Yi Qianqian kicked him and yelled, "Do you have a death wish?" Shenjilia chuckled. He held her in his arms as he closed his eyes and whispered, "I want a child." Yi Qianqian closed her eyes and opened them again. Chapter 1898. Shenjilia's voice was very low, and he sounded very sleepy. Shenjilia's eyes were half closed, and his breathing was even. She turned her body slightly and hugged his head. She whispered, "Actually, it's not that important whether we get married or not. It's just a certificate. It's no big deal." Shenjilia didn't open his eyes. He silently moved closer and hugged Yi Qianqian tighter. Yi Qianqian continued, "Although we're not married yet, what's the difference between us and those who are married?" "Yes. There's no difference. We'll still be together. We'll still eat and sleep. We'll do whatever married people can do. Getting married isn't just for the sake of making love." Shenjilia raised his head. His straightforwardness made Yi Qianqian blush. "I can also give birth to your child legitimately and let you call my parents mom and dad. Your father and I can call each other father and son. I can also make your home my home and my home your home. From then on, you and I will recognize each other, and the law will bind us together. When that time comes, we will never be able to separate." Shenjilia's long speech made Yi Qianqian burst out laughing. She reached out to caress his face and asked, "Are you afraid that I'll run away with someone else?" "I am afraid." "Don't worry." Yi Qianqian kissed him on the lips. "Other than death, nothing can separate us." As he spoke, he raised his left hand. On it was a sparkling diamond ring. We're already married, it's just a formality. Shinjilia pressed her hand down and held her in place. In a low voice, he said, that's exactly what I want. Yi Qianqian was speechless. Actually, she really wanted it. Oh, I'm so sleepy. Yi Qianqian changed the topic. I'll take a nap. Yes. Shinjilia calmed down. He hugged her and closed his eyes. She slept all the way until noon. When she woke up, Shinjilia was in the bathroom taking a shower. Yi Qianqian yawned and picked up her clothes. By the time he finished showering and blow-drying his hair, it was already past 2 in the afternoon. After checking out of the room, Yi Qianqian felt a little guilty at the thought of going back. How about we don't go back? They pretended that they hadn't just woken up and had been out for the whole day. Shinjilia could tell what she was thinking at first glance. He chuckled and said, let's go eat first. All right. Yi Qianqian replied, but she felt like she was floating as she walked. As she supported Shinjilia, Yi Qianqian was slightly annoyed and said, there won't be a next time. If this kind of perverted torture happened again, she might really fall apart. Shinjilia pretended not to hear her. He pulled her into his arms and returned to the spot where he had parked the day before. The two of them found a place to eat, and Shinjilia took Yi Qianqian out to play. Considering that Yi Qianqian's legs weren't working well the night before, Yi Qianqian took her to play some activities that weren't physically taxing and didn't require her to walk. During that time, Mrs. Shin called him several times, but Shinjilia brushed it off vaguely. When he got home, it was already past 8:00 in the evening. Mrs. Shen and Shen Longyue were sitting on the sofa watching TV. When they saw them, the couple looked at each other but didn't say anything. They pretended not to see them. Yi Qianqian felt extremely awkward and greeted them, hello, uncle. Hello, auntie. You're back. Do you want to eat? Nanny, he came up to them and asked. I left some food for you. Shall I heat it up for you? Chapter 1899. Okay, let's heat it up. We haven't eaten yet. It had been a while since he had eaten in the afternoon. When Nanny he heard that, she turned and went into the kitchen. Shinjilia led Yi Qianqian to the sofa and sat down. Mrs. Shin glanced at Shinjilia and said, your brother went to look for Manting. Huh? Shinjilia was surprised. When did you go there? This afternoon. I heard that Manting isn't in good health. It's the new year, so she abandoned her home and went to look for that woman. The old lady's unhappy words were heard, and it sounded like she was very angry. When Yi Qianqian heard the old lady's voice, she subconsciously turned her head to look. Old Mrs. Shen was in her pajamas. She glanced at Yi Qianqian and said, you're finally back. I thought you were going to kidnap my grandson. Yi Qianqian felt a little awkward. She looked at the old lady and greeted, hello, Grandma. Shinjilia wasn't happy to hear that. He interjected, if anyone is going to kidnap someone, it should be me. How can a grown man like me be kidnapped? Humph. Old Mrs. Shin sat down and said, Jilia, don't go out all day. It's the new year. Stay at home. I'm just going out to play. I'll bring Qianqian to meet my brother. Everyone says that Qianqian is very pretty. Beauty can be used to make a living. Old Mrs. Shin glanced at Yi Qianqian. It's not enough to be pretty. You have to be virtuous. My wife is very virtuous. She knows how to do housework and cook. She's very good at it, Shinjilia said proudly. She felt a little guilty. In reality, when they lived together, Shinjilia was the one who did the work. Old Mrs. Shin didn't know that. She believed him without a doubt and said, as long as you like it. Of course, I like it very much. Jilia, it's time to eat, Nanny, he called out. All right, let's go eat. Shinjilia pulled Yi Qianqian up, and the two of them sat at the table together. The food was delicious. Yi Qianqian held her chopsticks and glanced at Shinjilia. Shinjilia looked at her at the same time. They stared at each other for a while before they both burst out laughing. Yi Qianqian lowered her head silently. Her heart felt like it was filled with honey. As long as you like it. Of course, I love it. Connecticut. The weather was cold, but the Li family's old residence was very lively. There were doctors in civilian clothes coming and going, and everyone in the Li family was smiling. Northbound. Northbound. Ah! A woman's scream came from inside the room. Outside, Li Beixing was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. He paced left and right, and when he heard his wife's screams inside, he became even more anxious and sweaty. Mom, I want to go inside. Qin Shuhua held her son's hand outside. Smiling helplessly and happily, she said, No, no, women are giving birth. Men are not allowed in. Li Beixing was about to go crazy. He shouted, My wife is giving birth inside, not someone else's wife. Why can't I go in? No. Qin Shuhua was very insistent. She pulled Li Beixing away and said, If a man goes in, it's not good for the pregnant woman. How can there be so many feudal superstitions? I don't believe it. Chapter 1900. Li Xiqing glanced at Li Beixing and said, Why are you so agitated? Your wife is worried about you in there. When Li Beixing heard this, he was exasperated. He gritted his teeth and said, It's easy for you to say that. It's not like your wife is giving birth. Of course you're not anxious. Let's see how your wife looks when she gives birth. Li Xiqing shrugged and said, It's not like my wife hasn't given birth before. She even gave birth to 2. Now that she's only giving birth to 1, it will definitely be easier than the first time. As he spoke, his face was filled with pride. Li Beixing was annoyed when he saw his smug look, so he simply stopped looking at him and sat on the stool that Lu Sa had brought over at the door of the room. Qin Shuhua was still worried. She stood where she was and stared at Li Beixing, afraid that he would slip in if she wasn't careful. Sitting on the sofa, Li Xiqing glanced at her belly. It wasn't big, not even as big as when she was pregnant with Desu and Ursu for more than 7 months. So, it shouldn't be that painful, right? In fact, Li Xiqing was not sure. Arguing with Li Beixing just now was just him being stubborn. Only the heavens knew that this was the first time he was truly witnessing the birth of his own child. Desu and Ursu had grown up, and Li Xiqing owed them 4 years. As for this child, he had to take good care of him until he grew up. When Li Jinan saw how focused Li Xiqing was, he called out, Second brother. Yes? Li Xiqing looked up. Nervous? Li Xiqing pursed his lips and said, No. But why do you look so nervous? Li Jinan teased. What's there to be afraid of? It's not the first time second sister-in-law has given birth. Glancing at him, Li Xiqing decided not to talk. Su Qianxi also felt his nervousness. She reached out and gently comforted the back of his hand, saying, It's okay. Giving birth is actually not very painful. After all, Su Qianxi had a difficult delivery last time. After the natural birth failed, anesthetics were applied and the child was cut out. It was very painful, but she could not remember exactly how painful it was. F***ck. Li Beixing suddenly shouted, What kind of stupid rule is this? You can't go to the hospital during the new year, and you can't go to the hospital when you're giving birth. What's the point of having a hospital then? Both Qin Shuhua and Lu Sa laughed at his words. Lu Sa said, Young people just can't keep their cool. Young mistress is doing fine now. The doctors have prepared all the equipment. When we gave birth, it was really miserable. We couldn't go to the hospital all year round, and the equipment wasn't as advanced as it is now. Think about how much we suffered. That's right. When your mother gave birth, she hired a midwife at home. Qin Shuhua was a bit angry, but she was also looking forward to it. She said, I don't know if Manyu's child is a boy or a girl. It would be great if it's a girl. In your dreams. Old Master Li slowly walked out of the room with the help of his walking stick. It has always been difficult for the Li family to have a daughter. It's not like you don't know that. It had always been like this. In Li Xiqing's generation, Li Weiya was the only woman in the Li family. Later, Su Qianxi's belly worked hard and gave birth to a pair of twins, a girl. At this moment, the one in Xiaomanyu's belly was probably Xian. Chapter 1901. Old Master Li's words made everyone laugh. Yi Yuyu came up and helped Old Master Li to sit on the sofa. Old Master Li snorted and said, "What are you laughing at? Am I right?" Old Master Li's back was hunched, and his silver hair was loose. The wrinkles and age spots on his face were obvious. He slowly walked to the sofa and said, "In the past, there were midwives who worked on their own. Now, when people want to deliver a baby, they have to go to a hospital to hire a midwife. Oh, no, the name is much more elegant now. People call them obstetricians and gynecologists. Grandpa, have some tea." Su Qianxi handed a cup of tea to Old Master Li and couldn't help but laugh. The doctor is still inside. He won't be happy if he hears this. How can he not be happy? Old Master Li took the tea. He can earn extra money during the new year. He must be very happy. But Qianqian, why didn't the children come? The children are at home. Desu brought his friend over for the new year. Nanny Rong has nothing to do at home this year, so I asked her to take care of the children for me. We will go back to our hometown for the new year tomorrow. Su Qianxi sat next to Li Xiqing and spoke of the children with a gentle smile on her face. Old Master Li heard that and nodded. That's great. It's great that the children are so obedient. I was afraid that you wouldn't be able to take care of the 3 children by yourself. But is Desu's friend the little guy who came from the capital last time? Yes, his name is Chu. Well, his full name is Yu Chulin, right? It sounds quite nice. Old Master Li nodded. Qianqian's child, whether it's a boy or a girl, has been named Li Moyan. Grandpa, what about me? Li Jinan leaned over. This is my first child. Grandpa, please help me name him. Humph, I'll help you. What should he be called? I don't know. Li Jinan had left the name for Old Master Li, so he didn't even think about it. I've already named the eldest. If it's a boy, he'll be called Li Yuanhang. If it's a girl, she'll be called Li Qinhuan. Sounds good. Li Jinan quickly flattered. What about mine? With a look of disgust, Old Master Li reached out and pushed his face, saying, "Don't worry about it. I'll think about it slowly." Li Xiqing smiled and said, "Grandpa, I bought some bacon for you. I'll ask Mom to make some for you later. I don't have any teeth." "I can't eat anymore," Old Master Li snorted and turned his head away. "Why don't you get me something soft to eat? It's specially processed, so it's not hard." Su Qianxi interrupted, "I've tasted it. It's very soft and melted in my mouth, but it still tastes very good." "What's the point of that?" The old man sighed. I'm old. Being able to live to this age is already a blessing. What else can I hope for? I have a house full of grandchildren, and everything else is perfect." Wow, the loud cry of a baby drew the attention of everyone in the room. Li Beixing was like a spring that had been released. He jumped up, laughed loudly, and said, "I've given birth." As he spoke, he wanted to go in. "Don't let him in. I'll wash the baby." Of course, Qin Shuhua knew. While she was excited, she pressed down on her son and asked, "Is it a boy or a girl?" Chapter 1902. The doctor's voice made Li Beixing's heart, which had been on tenterhooks for a long time, relax. When Qin Shuhua saw her eldest son like this, she sighed and said, "Our Beixing is a father now. Time really flies." "How is it fast?" Beixing is already in his 30s, and it's his first time becoming a father. Even his younger brother is faster than him. Li Xiao heard the commotion and walked out with a smile on his face. Li Beixing didn't mind being scolded. He stood at the door and waited for the person inside to open the door. Finally, the doctor came out in a short while. The baby was wrapped very well. His eyes were closed, and his lips were pursed. His tiny body was covered in a layer of red. When Qin Shuhua saw the chubby baby, she was overjoyed. She took him from him and hugged him in her arms. She said happily, "You've finally given birth. Hey, let Grandma give you a hug." When Li Beixing saw his son, he smiled contentedly and immediately slipped inside. When everyone saw Li Beixing's actions, they couldn't help but laugh. Qiu Manyu was exhausted inside. It was winter, but her body was covered in a layer of sweat. A nurse was cleaning Qiu Manyu under a thick quilt. When she saw Li Beixing enter, she exclaimed, "Why did you come in?" Li Beixing didn't care. He went forward to look at his wife. Qiu Manyu's usually pretty face was pale. Li Beixing's heart ached as he said, "It's been hard on you." Qiu Manyu opened her eyes and groaned weakly. "Treat me better in the future." "Definitely." Both Su Qianxi and Yi Yuyu were pregnant. The three brothers and sisters-in-law had all taken turns to give birth. The news had spread throughout the neighborhood. Qin Shuhua carried the chubby baby over to the sofa and said, "He looks really good. He looks just like our Beixing." This was the first time Yi Yuyu had seen a newborn. She leaned over to take a look and didn't know what to say. "Does he look good?" When Su Qianxi saw Yi Yuyu's expression, she knew what was going on. She chuckled and said, "Babies are all wrinkled when they're born. They'll look better when they're all grown up. He looks like an old man." Li Jinnan didn't mince his words. He took a look and asked, "Is big brother coaxing sister-in-law inside?" "Humph, of course we have to coax her during childbirth." Qin Shuhua played with her grandson without looking up. When Xianxian gave birth to Daisu and Ersu, Siqing was not by her side. At that time, Xianxian stayed in the hospital for half a month before she was discharged. She did not have a man by her side. "This time, you have to make it up to Xianxian." Qin Shuhua glared at him. "Otherwise, even your mother won't let you go." Li Siqing was already feeling guilty. Hearing Qin Shuhua's words, he felt that he was lacking a lot. Holding her hand, he put it on his lips and kissed it without saying anything. Su Qianxi's eyes softened as she whispered, "It's okay. As long as you're back." "I'm back. When our Moyun is born, I'll definitely make up for what I owe Daisu and Ersu." "How can it be made up?" Li Jinnan glanced at Li Siqing. "The twins are very noisy." Yi Yuyu tugged at him and said, "Second uncle had no choice back then. What are you talking about him for?" Chapter 1903. The resentment in his words was clear. Li Jinnan was simply feeling indignant on Su Qianxi's behalf. That was all. When Yi Yuyu heard that, she felt a little uncomfortable. What did Li Jinnan mean by that? Although she didn't know what had happened back then, she had heard a little about it. After Li Siqing's death, one of Su Qianxi's best friends had come to woo her. What was even more frightening was that Captain Li had been very supportive of that person. If Su Qianxi hadn't been determined, she would have been poached away. Yi Yuyu didn't feel good when she thought of that. Su Qianxi had been a widow that year, and he hadn't been happy about it. Could he still be interested in her? Furthermore, this was her second marriage. Was Li Jinnan hinting at something in his words? She instinctively glanced at Li Jinnan, who quickly turned back to look at Yi Yuyu. Li Jinnan didn't know what she was thinking. Confused, he asked, "Isn't that right, honey?" Yi Yuyu smiled and nodded her head. Su Qianxi quickly waved her hands and said, all right. Siqing was just thinking about our future. If it hadn't been for those 4 years, we might still be living in fear. The Tang family wouldn't let them off. Su Qianxi knew that very well. Let bygones be bygones. What's the point of saying that? Captain Li paused his walking stick with a displeased expression. Li Siqing was silent. He gave Li Jinnan a meaningful look. The Li family was overjoyed. Lu Sa had cooked a lot of delicious dishes to celebrate. Li Beixing was immersed in the happiness of the birth of his first son. Li Xiqing asked Su Qianxi to stay at the old manor while he went to pick up the children for dinner. The whole family was happy and harmonious. However, it wasn't so peaceful on the way back. Li Jinnan drove, and Yi Yuyu sat in the front passenger seat. Yi Yuyu reclined the seat and leaned back. She called out, "Hubby." "Yeah? Did you like second sister-in-law in the past?" Yi Yuyu's question was more direct. She had been holding these words in for a long time. When she heard Li Jinnan's indignation for Su Qianxi, she couldn't stop it. She felt that if she didn't say it out loud, she would go crazy. When Li Jinnan heard that, he turned to look at her and asked, "Why would you ask that? Do you remember when my sister's friend, Lily, took us out to play?" It was a long time ago, and Li Jinnan had no recollection of it. He glanced at Yi Yuyu and asked, "What do you think?" "At that time, I felt that you had a different feeling for your second sister-in-law. I always felt that you had a crush on her." Yi Yuyu had always been a straightforward person. When she spoke, she turned her head and stared at Li Jinnan. Her fair face was filled with accusation, doubt, and sadness. Li Jinnan hadn't expected Yi Yuyu to ask such a question. He was amused and replied, "Why would you think that? Second sister-in-law belongs to second brother. Why would I like her?" There had been a small spark, but before it could ignite, he had resolutely cut it off. Later, he only had respect for her. Li Jinnan didn't even dare to like her as a friend, let alone have a crush on her. Chapter 1904. Of course it's true. Why would you think that? You're just imagining things. Li Jinnan held on to the steering wheel and smiled helplessly. If second brother hears this, he'll chop me to death. Li Xiqing was very possessive. If he knew that someone wanted to lay a finger on his wife, he would definitely hack him to death. Even his younger brother was no exception. Even if it was just a misunderstanding, it wouldn't do. But, I keep having this feeling. Yi Yuyu pouted slightly. Furthermore, I keep feeling that the words you say at home are ambiguous. What is it? What do you mean by saying that if it were any other woman, she would remarry? Are you trying to say that if it were me, I would remarry? Yi Yuyu's voice was laced with accusation, dissatisfaction, and grievance. Li Jinnan felt wronged and said innocently, "I didn't mean that. I just feel sorry for second sister-in-law." He turned to look at Yi Yuyu. Yi Yuyu's face looked haggard. It was obvious that she hadn't had a good rest. Li Jinnan sighed softly and said, "Honey, don't let your imagination run wild. I only love you, and you are the only one I have ever loved. There has never been anyone else." Yi Yuyu's expression softened when she heard that. However, there was still sadness in his eyes. Li Jinnan looked at Yi Yuyu and continued, "Back then, second sister-in-law managed second brother's company all by herself. It wasn't easy. When she was pregnant, she had to stay up late to look at the proposals and give her suggestions. At that time, second sister-in-law was pregnant with twins. Her belly was much bigger than the average pregnant woman's. She had more severe reactions, and her back and legs often hurt. She couldn't even sit still." Li Jinnan's words were full of emotion. Originally, second sister-in-law didn't have to bear such a heavy responsibility. If second brother was here, second sister-in-law not only didn't have to do those things, but also could live a very relaxed and happy life. "So, I feel sorry for second sister-in-law. You sure know a lot about it." Yi Yuyu's tone was a little sour as she turned her head away. Li Jinnan chuckled and replied, "At that time, only second sister-in-law and I were managing the company. Of course I knew. It's not an exaggeration to say that the reason I have the skills I have today is because of second sister-in-law's guidance." When Yi Yuyu heard that, she felt even more uncomfortable. So, Li Jinnan and Su Qianxi had been together for 4 years? For 4 years, they faced each other and were together every day. It was no wonder that Li Jinnan had a different feeling for her. Yuyu. If I had any feelings for second sister-in-law, something would have happened a long time ago. The only reason it hasn't happened is that the situation doesn't allow it. If the situation allowed it, you would have? Yi Yu asked out of reflex. As soon as the words left her mouth, she realized that something was amiss. Yi Yu secretly clicked her tongue in frustration. Li Jinan glanced at her and replied, "There won't be such a time." Once she's second sister-in-law, she'll always be second sister-in-law. Sister-in-law can only be sister-in-law. She looked at him and softly said, "I'm sorry." Chapter 1905. Li Jinan chuckled helplessly. What? Do all pregnant women like to let their imaginations run wild? Li Jinan didn't know what to do with her. He held his forehead and said, "That's not what I meant." Yi Yu felt even more aggrieved and said, "Let me tell you, if a man really comes to seduce me, I won't leave, Li Jinan. I believe that you won't. No, even if you die, I won't." Yi Yu interrupted him. "I can be like second sister-in-law." Li Jinan couldn't help but laugh when he heard that. The car had already entered the neighborhood. Li Jinan drove steadily. The speed of the car wasn't fast. He slowly looked at the greenery around him. He was in a good mood. Yi Yu continued, "Although I might not be able to manage such a big company as well as second sister-in-law, I will try my best. I will take good care of the child and raise him well. If that doesn't work, I will study. If second sister-in-law can do it, so can I." Yi Yu's eyes lit up. Li Jinan couldn't hold back his laughter. He stopped the car and leaned over the steering wheel to laugh. Yi Yu panicked and said, "What are you laughing at?" "I'm serious." "Are you hoping for me to die?" Li Jinan asked with a laugh as he wiped his eyes. Yi Yu was annoyed when she heard that. She pinched his arm and said, "You know what I mean." "Ha ha ha." Li Jinan unbuckled his seatbelt and said, "I know, but what you said will never happen. I'm just saying what if. There's no what if." Li Jinan leaned over and unbuckled Yi Yu's seatbelt. He gently said, "We can still love for a long time." His low voice was magnetic and flirtatious. Yi Yu's heart skipped a beat at that moment. She found herself looking into Li Jinan's deep, dark eyes. She fell. It was out of control. Li Jinan cupped her face with his large hands and kissed her gently. It was a light and gentle kiss. Yi Yu pursed her lips. Li Jinan quickly got out of the car and opened the door for her. He helped her out. Li Jinan looked at her belly. He was filled with the joy and excitement of being a father for the first time. "Do you think our child will be a boy or a girl?" Yi Yu asked. "Maybe a girl." "It's probably a boy. Grandpa said it's impossible for it to be a girl. I like girls. It must be a girl. 3, 2, 1. The tender voice was like a sweet and sticky cotton candy. Li Jianhua turned around abruptly, but there was nothing behind her. A naughty smile appeared on his young face as he said, "Brothers, I'm here to look for you." However, there was still no movement in the empty living room. Li Jianhua was wearing a pink princess dress and a pink bow hairpin in her hair. Her round face was like a jade sculpture, and her big black grape-like eyes were rolling around. She tiptoed as she said, Brother Chu, Brother Mosen, where are you? Can you cough or sneeze?" No one answered. "I won't find you." Still, no one answered. With a crafty look on his face, he shouted into the air, "Aya, little Sue. You came at the right time. Come and help me find my brother." "No, Ursa can't cheat." Chapter 1906. Li Jianhua ran behind the curtains in the living room. Her crisp laughter was very eye-catching in the living room. She lifted the curtains but didn't see anyone. Li Jianhua was a little unhappy. She walked all the way and shouted, "Brother Mosen, you little liar. Where are you? Ursa can't find you." However, no one answered. Li Jianhua walked forward a little discouraged. She turned left and right and finally went into the kitchen. The kitchen was clean and tidy. Li Jianhua walked in and shouted, "Brother Chu, Brother Mosen, brother, where are you?" As she shouted, she yawned. She opened the fridge and tiptoed to get herself a bottle of milk. She removed the straw and inserted it into the bottle. Then, she started drinking. Li Jianhua sat on the sofa and felt deeply defeated. While drinking, Li Jianhua suddenly thought of a place. She took a step and went behind the stairs. Behind the stairs was a small storage room, in which there were a few toys that the children usually played with. Every time she played hide-and-seek, she wouldn't look for this place. Of course, she didn't find anyone. Li Jianhua felt that she was very quick-witted. She shouted proudly, "I know where you are." Her short legs moved and she was already in front of the cubicle by the stairs. Li Jianhua twisted the door and walked in. However, the lights inside were on, but there was no one. Li Jianhua looked at the room full of toys and felt even more defeated. She could only close the door and then sighed. However, she suddenly thought of something and turned to open the door again. She looked behind the door. Indeed, a tall figure was behind the door. Li Jianhua was happy and was about to cheer when Yu Chulin immediately put his hand to his mouth and said, "Shu." Seeing him like this, Li Jianhua felt that it was a little fun to be mysterious. She also put a finger to her mouth and said, "Shu." Yu Chulin was older than them, so he was naturally taller than them. Seeing Li Jianhua's short body, Yu Chulin looked down and said, "Come in." Li Jianhua blinked her eyes, which were as big as black grapes, and stared at Yu Chulin. Yu Chulin was very fair. It was not as fair as Li Mosen's natural white complexion. Instead, it was the healthy skin of an Asian. She had a high nose bridge, red lips, and beautiful eyes. When Li Jianhua first saw Yu Chulin, she felt that he was very good-looking. When Li Jianhua heard him calling for her, she sneaked in mysteriously and asked, "Brother Chu, what are you doing here?" Yu Chulin took out an assembled tank that could fire a cannon with a press of a button. But now, the entire toy was in a mess, and it looked like it was broken. "Brother Chu, this is Brother Mosen's favorite toy. If you break it, Brother Mosen will be angry." Li Jianhua's eyes widened as she stared at the toy. There was a stern warning on her face, but at the same time, there was worry. What should we do? Brother Mosen will be sad if he sees this. On Yu Chulin's fair face, his rosy lips were tightly pursed. There was an apologetic look on his childish face as he said, "I accidentally touched it just now and fell. I'll fix it." Chapter 1907. Her help. Yu Chulin wanted to laugh. In the past, he had only heard Li Jianxian talk about his sister. According to his good friend, Li Jianxian, his sister only had 3 characteristics: stupid, silly, and silly. Yu Chulin had naively thought that Li Jianxian was just joking. He didn't expect that after a few days of interaction, she was indeed quite silly. However, it wasn't to the extent that Li Jianxian had described. Yu Chulin had never liked to play with girls since he was young. However, when he heard Li Jianhua's suggestion, he pursed his lips and nodded. "Don't talk. Just sit and watch." "Oh. Does Brother Chu really know how to repair it?" Li Jianhua found it a little unbelievable. "I heard that the assembly of this tank is very complicated. Even when my father brought it back, it took him many minutes to assemble it." "How many minutes is that?" "How many minutes?" Li Jianhua couldn't tell. When she heard the question, she blushed and said, "Just many minutes." Yu Chulin laughed and sat down cross-legged again. Li Jianhua blinked her eyes at the way he was concentrating on his task. "Brother Chu, your eyelashes are so long." Chu was indifferent. He stared at the thing in his hand and frowned slightly. "Brother Chu, I've caught you. You'll be the ghost next." "Okay. Wait for me," Yu Chulin replied. He seemed a little troubled. "Brother Chu, how did you know to hide here? Did my brother teach you that?" Li Jianhua felt that it was very smart to think of hiding here. What was even more smart was that she actually thought of such a place to hide. She felt that she was even smarter. Yu Chulin responded calmly and stared at the tank in his hand. I knew it. Brother Chu, isn't my brother amazing? The adults say that my brother's grades are excellent. They say that my brother is very smart and can skip a grade next year. Li Jianyue rested her chin on her hand as she watched Yu Chulin's busy hands. She pouted and said, if only I could be as good as my brothers. I want the adults to praise me too. Brother Chu, do you feel happy when you're praised by the adults? Yu Chulin was speechless. Yu Chulin furrowed his eyebrows and looked up at her. When Li Jianyue saw that he was finally looking at her, she giggled and said, Brother Chu, were you dumb in the past too? Did you only become smart later on? No. I don't believe it. Li Jianyue pouted. Granny Rong said that every child has to learn. I'm very smart. It's just because my brothers are boys that I foolishly climbed the stairs. You want to talk about stages, right? When Li Jianyue heard this, she immediately understood. She nodded and said with a smile, yes. The stage, the section of the ladder. Yu Chulin, Brother Chu, you haven't answered me yet. Do you feel happy when you're praised by the adults? I'm used to it. I don't feel anything. Yu Chulin's answer was simple and clear. Li Jianyue pouted. Brother said the same thing. Only Brother Mosen would tell me the truth. What did Mosen tell you? He said he was happy. He was as happy as when Ursu was praised. Li Jianyue smiled. Chapter 1908. Li Jianyue snorted. Brother Mosen would never lie to me. Brother Mosen is the best brother in the world. At the mention of Li Mosen, Li Jianyue got up and said, I'm not going to stay here with you. I'm going to play with Brother Mosen. Yu Chulin heaved a sigh of relief and said, all right, go ahead then. I'm almost done. I'll call you when I'm out. Li Jianyue was a little unhappy when she saw his relieved expression. She stomped her feet and walked out. Li Jianyue walked around outside and finally found Li Mosen behind the table. Brother Mosen, I found you. Li Mosen's blue eyes looked at Li Jianyue. He smiled helplessly and said, it's my turn. No, it's Brother Chu's turn. Li Jianyue was a little proud. The first person I found is Brother Chu. Where is he? He's in the toy room. He's fixing something. There was a flash of surprise in Li Mosen's clear and pure eyes. Why? Li Jianyue realized that she seemed to have spilled the beans and immediately covered her mouth. Let's go take a look. Li Mosen took Li Jianyue's hand and went to the toy room. Yu Chulin had just finished repairing the toy. He heaved a huge sigh of relief after he carefully placed it back in its original position. As soon as he walked out of the door, he saw Li Jianyue and Li Mosen. Yu Chulin frowned. He was a little unhappy and said, didn't I say that I'll fix it? I'll apologize to Mosen after I fix it. Yu Chulin's tone was a little fierce. Li Jianyue shrank her neck in grievance and said, I know, why are you so fierce? Li Mosen was unhappy. Ursu only said that you were repairing something here. What did you break just now? I'm sorry. Yu Chulin looked at Li Mosen and said, I accidentally knocked over your toy, but I've fixed it now. I'll get it for you. What is it? The tank. Li Jianyue exclaimed. Brother Chu is amazing. He actually fixed the tank. His small face was full of worship. When Li Mosen saw this, he felt a little uncomfortable and said, Ursu, I know how to repair it too. Li Jianyue giggled and said, but I'm not as good as Daddy. Daddy is much better. The corners of Yu Chulin's lips curled up slightly. Then, he turned around and retrieved the small tank that he had painstakingly repaired. Li Mosen took a look. Little Tank's body was painted black, and there was a patch where some of the paint had clearly fallen off. Feeling a little heartache, he said, it's broken. Yu Chulin looked over. It was true. With an apologetic look on his face, he said, I'm really sorry. I didn't do it on purpose. I've already fixed it, so it shouldn't affect your use. However, if you still mind, I can buy an identical one for you and install it for you. Li Mosen stared at the small tank in his hand and felt uncomfortable. There's no need, Li Jianhua said. Brother Mosen isn't petty. You've already apologized. Brother Mosen is the most generous. He'll definitely forgive you. Am I right, Brother Mosen? Li Jianhua looked as if she had seen through everything. There was pride on her small face. Li Mosen nodded. Yes, it's all right. Yu Chulin smiled gently and said, Thank you, Mosen. The two boys looked at each other with a faint smile on their faces. Chapter 1909. A sleepless night. Yi Qianqian slept in the guest room and felt her body aching. The intensity from last night had not completely dissipated today. Tomorrow was New Year's Eve. As the new year approached, Yi Qianqian felt nervous. Her heart was beating so fast that she couldn't fall asleep no matter how hard she tossed and turned. Suddenly, the phone on the bedside table vibrated. It was a WeChat message. Shenjilia, are you asleep? Yi Qianqian glanced at the time. It was already past 1 a.m. Picking it up, he let out a long sigh and replied, No. Shenjilia, I'm coming for you. Yi Qianqian's heart skipped a beat. She felt that something was wrong. Just as she was about to text Shenjilia not to come, she heard a knock on the door. When Yi Qianqian heard the knock on the door, a look of reluctance crossed her face. Shenjilia lay on the bed, pretending to be a corpse. Very quickly, he began to knock again. Resigned to her fate, Yi Qianqian stood up and opened the door. Shenjilia was only wearing a set of long-sleeved pajamas. When he saw Yi Qianqian, he smiled brightly. He walked up and put his arm around Yi Qianqian's waist. I can't sleep, he said. Yi Qianqian was shocked and instinctively looked behind Shenjilia. Behind him, there was nothing. She breathed a sigh of relief. That's right, it's already past 1 o'clock in the morning, how could there still be anyone around? She closed the door and turned around. Before she could take a good look at Shenjilia, he had already picked her up. He turned around and pressed her down onto the bed. Yi Qianqian exclaimed. Shenjilia pressed her down and whispered, I'll sleep with you. Yi Qianqian struggled for a moment and said, This bed is so small. It'll be too cramped for 2 people. Why don't you come to my place? Shenjilia got up and gazed at her with his amber eyes. Let's go. Let's sleep together. It'll be easier to sleep. No. Yi Qianqian objected. It wouldn't be good if Grandma saw it. She might even be criticized. She didn't want it. Shenjilia laid on top of her like a corpse and said, Let's sleep like this then. It'll save space to sleep on top of each other. With a look of disdain, Yi Qianqian said, Go away. Don't you know how heavy you are? Shenjilia chuckled. He hugged her and narrowed his eyes as he said, Qianqian. What are you doing? Yi Qianqian looked over with rapt attention. Shenjilia snuggled up to her and whispered, What should I do? I want you. Yi Qianqian blushed and said, Are you crazy? This is your house. Shenjilia didn't care. He reached out and caressed her body, which was only wearing a thin nightgown. Yi Qianqian pressed his hand down and said, If you continue to do this, I'll get angry. Shenjilia didn't act rashly. He lay down flat and said, I can't sleep. I slept too long during the day. Well, it's New Year's Eve tomorrow. Yi Qianqian turned to look at him, and Shenjilia turned to look at her as well. When their eyes met, Yi Qianqian felt an indescribable sense of satisfaction in her heart. Shenjilia chuckled and said, There's an event tomorrow. Someone will be coming to look for Grandma. They're all elders, so don't be nervous. Just go through it with a calm heart. Why are you looking for Grandma? I don't know. They come every year. Aren't guests usually on the second day of the new year? Isn't that a little too early? Yi Qianqian found it a little strange. Wasn't New Year's Eve usually a day for family reunions? This old lady was really different from ordinary people. Chapter 1910. Will Grandma's friend be as difficult to deal with as Grandma? Don't worry. Shinjilia laughed and looked at Yi Qianqian. He seemed to be comforting her, but at the same time, he gloated and said, they won't be more difficult to deal with than our old lady. When Yi Qianqian heard that, she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She sighed and said, it's so difficult. Huh? Shinjilia looked up at her. I have a feeling that God doesn't like me, and that's why he wants to torture me like this. Don't think that way. Shinjilia looked up at Yi Qianqian and said seriously, what if God thinks you're easy to bully? Yi Qianqian glared at him and extended her leg to give him a kick. Shinjilia laughed and hugged her. Let's go to sleep. I'm sleepy. Go back to your place. It'll be ugly if your parents see you. Not good. What are you afraid of? Shinjilia snuggled into her arms and said, you've already come home with me for the new year. The elders already know what it means. They won't be bothered by it. Although that was what she said, Yi Qianqian still felt a little strange. Looking at Shinjilia, Yi Qianqian subconsciously turned her head and looked around the room. Could it be that there were surveillance cameras? Otherwise, why would old Mrs. Shin knock on their door at such a coincidental time? Shinjilia glanced at her and reached out to turn her face back. He said, don't let your imagination run wild. Grandma wouldn't do anything perverted. Yi Qianqian blushed and pushed him away. I didn't even say anything. How did you know what I was thinking? Humph. Don't I know you? This woman was sensitive and prone to overthinking things. You're just like a child. I only imagine all kinds of imaginary things after something happens when I'm young. You're so old, yet you still can't stop. You're the old one. Yi Qianqian spat. How am I old? Shinjilia was silent for a moment. He looked at the mound on Yi Qianqian's chest and said, you're not big. Yi Qianqian was even more annoyed. She pinched his waist and pushed him away. Get lost. Shinjilia almost fell off the bed. He hurriedly pulled her back. Yi Qianqian fell into his arms as soon as he pulled her along. Shinjilia reached out with his perverted hand and said, big, big, big. Yi Qianqian smacked him. She was both embarrassed and annoyed. You're going to die. Get lost. Shinjilia pinned her down and said in a low voice, if you want to get lost, then get lost. Have I ever been afraid of you? Hey, what are you doing? Take off your clothes and scram. Oh, New Year's Eve. The capital couldn't be compared to Yun Town. When Yi Qianqian woke up, she saw the woman from the Shin family making dumplings. Yi Qianqian was completely clueless about such manual labor, but she still went to wash her hands. After disinfecting them, she went forward to join in the fun. Nanny he liked Yi Qianqian very much, so she patiently guided Yi Qianqian on how to wrap it. Yi Qianqian looked at it attentively and wrapped a few bags. Although it didn't look good, at least it didn't leak out. Ding dong, the doorbell rang. Yi Qianqian subconsciously thought, it must be the old lady's friends. Sure enough, after Shinjilia went to open the door, the people who came in were all old men and old ladies. Chapter 1911. Fortunately, they didn't seem to be interested in her. Yi Qianqian didn't make a sound, afraid that they would notice her. However, she couldn't hide from them in the end. Qianqian, come over and meet someone, Shinjilia said. Yi Qianqian finished wrapping the last dumpling and replied, sure. She washed her hands nervously. After making sure that she was clean and that her face and hands weren't stained with flour, she walked out. Shinjilia sat in the middle of a group of old people. He looked young and handsome. When he saw Yi Qianqian, Shinjilia waved at her and said, come over and meet the elders. Yi Qianqian was a little embarrassed. She looked at them and said, hello, Grandpa and Grandma. My name is Yi Qianqian. She's my girlfriend. The old people looked at Yi Qianqian and then turned to look at each other. They seemed to be speaking in a dialect, but Yi Qianqian felt a little more at ease when she saw their eyes. They didn't seem to be particularly dissatisfied with her. Come over here. Shenjilia waved at Yi Qianqian. Yi Qianqian walked over to Shenjilia and sat down. Shenjilia introduced them and said, "This is Grandpa Wang Yu." "Hello, Grandpa Wang Yu." "This is Grandma Dongfang." Dongfang? Yi Qianqian rarely saw people with multiple surnames. She couldn't help but take a second look and obediently greeted, "Hello, Grandma Dongfang. This is Grandpa Nanfeng." She recognized them one by one. In fact, Yi Qianqian felt that they all looked similar and didn't remember a single one of them. The smiles on their faces were quite amiable, but for some reason, Yi Qianqian's hair stood on end when they stared at her. It was lunchtime, and all the grandparents ate. Nanny he had woken up early to make dumplings. Yi Qianqian helped entertain the guests. Later, the guests followed old Mrs. Shen to the study to chat. It wasn't until 3 in the afternoon that the guests were sent off. An old woman with white hair in a bun held Yi Qianqian's hand before she left. She smiled warmly and said, "Good girl." Yi Qianqian was stunned. She didn't understand what she meant. She smiled, but before she could say anything, the old woman let go of her hand and left with her old companions. After Yi Qianqian and Shenjilia saw the guests off, Shenjilia turned to look at her. Shenjilia's eyes seemed to carry a strange scrutinizing look. Yi Qianqian felt strange all over. She waved her hand and said, "What are you doing?" "Grandma Dongfang actually likes you very much. Grandma Dongfang has the best relationship with Grandma. She's just as difficult to deal with as Grandma." Yi Qianqian looked at Shenjilia. Ah. When Yi Qianqian heard the news, she was shocked. Is it that strange? Then why did she say that I'm a good girl? I don't know either. Shenjilia smiled happily. No matter what, it's a good thing that the old man likes you. Don't you agree? Yi Qianqian had a nagging feeling that something was amiss. She nodded her head and said, "That makes sense." When Yi Qianqian returned to the house, old Mrs. Shen was sitting in the living room, munching on melon seeds. When she saw Yi Qianqian enter, she said, "Jilia, go and cut some fruit for me." Shenjilia glanced at the old lady and then at Yi Qianqian. "Qianqian, come here." Chapter 19:12. Shenjilia glanced at her, then smiled and walked into the kitchen. "Qianqian," old Mrs. Shen called out. Yi Qianqian immediately tensed up and replied, "Yes, yes. Grandma, I'm here. Don't be nervous." "Is Grandma scary?" Old Mrs. Shen looked at her helplessly and said, "Although Grandma is a little strict with you at times, it's not to the extent that you're so afraid of me now." Yi Qianqian smiled. She was too embarrassed to say anything. Yes, yes, she was afraid. After all, she was not that strict with herself. When old Mrs. Shen saw Yi Qianqian's reaction, she laughed and asked, "You met all my friends just now, didn't you?" "Yes, I have. Dongfang is my good friend. We've known each other for decades. She likes you very much." It was Grandma Dongfang, who had just spoken to him. Yi Qianqian looked up at old Mrs. Shen. Old Mrs. Shen's eyes were fixed on Yi Qianqian's face. She nodded her head and said, "You're not bad looking. You have good physiognomy. I liked you a lot when I first met you." As she spoke, she subconsciously glanced at Yi Qianqian's hand. Yi Qianqian met the old lady's gaze and opened her palm. There was a red line there. Very light, very light. Old Mrs. Shen leaned forward to take a look. Huh. Yi Qianqian was shocked and instinctively withdrew her hand. "Let me take a look." Old Mrs. Shen stood up and walked over to Yi Qianqian. Yi Qianqian was a little scared. When she saw old Mrs. Shen, she shrank back. When old Mrs. Shen saw Yi Qianqian's reaction, she felt a little upset. He muttered, "What are you afraid of?" Will I eat you? He reached out and grabbed Yi Qianqian's wrist. Yi Qianqian consciously opened her palm. Soon, a faint red line appeared on old Mrs. Shen's palm. It has faded. Old Mrs. Shen looked at him. How did you do this? Yi Qianqian looked at her palms. I don't know either. Moreover, has it faded? Why didn't she feel anything? It's good that it has faded, it's good that it has faded. It was as if she had been possessed by a ghost. Yi Qianqian felt her hair stand on end. This old lady was poisonous. He had only said a few words, but she was already scared out of her wits. Yi Qianqian retracted her hand and took a look at herself. Has it faded? Perhaps it was because she stared at him every day, but she didn't notice any changes at all. Old Mrs. Shen stared at her for a long time and suddenly asked, when are you going to get married? Yi Qianqian couldn't react for a moment. Let me ask you, when are you planning to get married? Julia isn't young anymore. It's not good for you to keep dragging it out. Yi Qianqian felt a little confused and said, Didn't you forbid us from getting married? Nonsense. Old Mrs. Shen had a look of rebuke on her face as she said, Didn't you come to our house for the new year? Do you think that just anyone can come to our house to eat and stay with us? Isn't it because you are my future granddaughter-in-law? Otherwise, I wouldn't have let you in. Yi Qianqian smiled awkwardly and replied, Is that so? Hee, what else? As old Mrs. Shen spoke, she took out an old almanac from under the table and said, Let me look at the date. Just now, Dongfang said that Julia's wedding should be held in spring. It's not the new year yet, so the preparations are just in time. Yi Qianqian felt that the old lady must have seen a ghost. She had changed too quickly. Chapter 1913. Yi Qianqian was at a loss for words. What do you mean by divorce when you want to? Yi Qianqian looked at the old lady flipping through the calendar. She pursed her lips and said, We won't divorce. Old Mrs. Shen looked up at Yi Qianqian and said, That's for the best. I do hope that you won't divorce and stay together for the rest of your lives. It'll be nice to be happy. But, it's hard to change one's fate. Old Mrs. Shen didn't finish her sentence. She was focused on looking at the days. Yi Qianqian felt uncomfortable. Did this old lady really want them to get a divorce? Annoying. Shenjilia quickly cut the fruit and inserted a few fruit forks into it. He picked up a piece of apple and handed it to Yi Qianqian. Yi Qianqian didn't dare take it. She glanced at the old lady. Shenjilia said, Grandma, the fruit is here. Okay. You guys eat. Grandma is busy. Old Mrs. Shen squinted her eyes for a while. She couldn't see clearly, so she found a box under the coffee table and took out a pair of reading glasses. Shenjilia shrugged and handed the apple to Yi Qianqian. The apple was soaked in salt water after it was cut. It tasted pretty good. Most importantly, it didn't turn yellow. Yi Qianqian took a bite. Shenjilia sat beside her and asked softly, What did Grandma say to you? Yi Qianqian glanced at Shenjilia and said, That we get married. Shenjilia almost choked on the apple. He looked at Yi Qianqian in disbelief and asked, Really? Before Yi Qianqian could reply, Shenjilia looked at old Mrs. Shen and asked, Grandma, do you want us to get married? Old Mrs. Shen glanced at Shenjilia. When she saw the ecstatic smile on her grandson's face, she laughed and said, Yes. Are you happy? Are you surprised? Shenjilia was about to go crazy. He quickly walked over and hugged old Mrs. Shen excitedly. Grandma, I love you. Old Mrs. Shen was enjoying it but also disgusted. She pushed Shenjilia away and said with a disgusted expression, You're so annoying. Who wants you to love me? Go love your wife. Shenjilia was overjoyed. He jumped up and returned to Yi Qianqian's side. He kissed her hard on the cheek and said, Honey, I love you. Wifey, Yi Qianqian blushed at the way he addressed her. She felt guilty and couldn't help but ask, can we really get married? Of course, Grandma said it's okay, so we can definitely get married. Shenjilia had complete faith in old Mrs. Shen. He stood up and said, that's right. Let's talk to your father about this and make him happy. As he spoke, Shenjilia stepped forward to make the call. However, Yi Qianqian went forward to hold him back and said, wait a minute. Are you sure it's okay? Didn't grandmother and Uncle Blind Man say that I have to wait until I'm 28 years old? When did I say you're going to be 28? Old Mrs. Shen looked aggrieved and said, I only said that you might not live past the age of 28. Yi Qianqian was speechless. Shenjilia replied, you might as well say you got married at 28. Old Mrs. Shen was obviously in a good mood. She said, it doesn't matter. If you want to get married, just get married. Jilia isn't young anymore, and neither are you. It won't be too late to have children in a few years. Chapter 1914. For the next few days, Yi Qianqian followed Shenjilia around. On New Year's Eve, the family had dinner together. Shen Luo rushed home, but he was nowhere to be seen the next day. On the first and third days of the new year, Shenjilia took Yi Qianqian everywhere to play. On the second and fourth day of the new year, he would bring her around as a guest. Whenever he caught someone, he would say, my wife is getting married. When the time comes, don't forget the red packet. Yi Qianqian felt both awkward and amused at the same time. After the fifth day of the new year, Shenjilia couldn't wait to return to Yuntown with Yi Qianqian. As soon as they arrived home, Shenjilia carried his luggage and walked in. He called out, Uncle, we're back. Yi Zhenhua was entertaining guests at home, and the neighbors were chatting happily. When they heard Shenjilia's shout, everyone looked over. Yi Zhenhua smiled and said, my daughter has returned. Putting down the teacup, Yi Zhenhua walked out. She asked, Dad, why didn't you close the door? What if someone came in? Shenjilia walked into the house. Then, he entered the living room and saw his uncles. Yi Qianqian introduced them one by one before pulling Shenjilia over and introducing him to them. This is my boyfriend. His name is Shenjilia. You can just call him Xiao Shen. Oh, Shen. Qianqian has grown up and has a boyfriend. He's so handsome. Qianqian is also a great beauty. It's only right for her to have a handsome boyfriend. The uncles spoke in a dialect. Yi Qianqian smiled as she listened to them. She took her luggage and returned to her room. Yi Zhenhua poured a cup of tea for Shenjilia and asked, why are you back so soon? I thought you weren't coming back. Shenjilia smiled sheepishly and said, Qianqian will be going back to work in a few days, so I thought I'd come back to play for a few days and visit you. As he spoke, he suddenly thought of something and said, my father asked me to bring you something. I'll bring it over for you. Shen Longwei was unable to come. There were many things to do before and after the new year. Therefore, he had specially asked Shenjilia to bring some cigarettes and alcohol. He also bought an antique thumb ring. Yi Zhenhua was not interested in cigarettes and alcohol, but he was interested in the thumb ring. He took it and examined it, saying, it's really beautiful. This jade is not cheap. Yi Zhenhua was smoking a cigarette. He took it out and put it out. Why are you being so polite? We'll be a family sooner or later. I haven't even paid a visit yet. He nodded his head and said, sooner or later, we'll be family. By the way, Uncle, I'm here to tell you that Qianqian and I are getting married. Yi Zhenhua chuckled. Didn't you tell me before? Shenjilia exclaimed in surprise and asked, did she say that? Why don't I remember? Yes, he told me a few days ago. He told me again yesterday and again today. This is the third time. Yi Zhenhua smiled and shook his head. Are young people so stupid? Shenjilia was a little embarrassed. He looked at the other uncles and asked, Uncle, how should I address them? This is sixth great uncle, this is. He introduced them one by one, but communication was a little difficult. Few of the older generation were fluent in Mandarin. Most of them spoke half-heartedly. Shinjilia watched them speak. They were basically guessing and guessing. Fortunately, he could still guess a little. He had taken off his cotton-padded jacket, but he didn't cover himself with a blanket. Shinjilia was shocked. He went forward to pull out the blanket from under her and slowly covered her body with it. Yi Qianqian moaned and stretched. When she looked at Shinjilia, she yawned and asked, "Have they left?" "Yes, let's go." Shinjilia sat down beside Yi Qianqian and said, "I just had a chat with your father." Chapter 1916. He warned me that if I didn't treat you well in the future, he would go to the capital and blow my head off. Pfft, Yi Qianqian burst out laughing. Shinjilia's face was stern as he said, "I'm not joking. He said he would blow your head off, and he meant it." Yi Qianqian laughed even louder as she asked, "What? Did my father really say that?" Shinjilia looked helpless when he saw Yi Qianqian's reaction. He nodded his head and said, "Yes, that's exactly what he said." "Yeah, however," Shinjilia moved closer to Yi Qianqian and said, "Even if your father didn't warn me, I would still treat you well. If you don't treat me well, I'll leave." "Go where?" "Run away from home." "Why would I tell you?" Yi Qianqian wrapped herself in the blanket. "If you dare to be mean to me, I'll leave. I'll leave every time I'm mean to you. Let's see if you dare to do it again." Shinjilia smiled and pleaded, "I can't afford to offend you. Your words are worse than blowing my head off." Yi Qianqian looked smug. Shinjilia felt a little emotional and said, "How did we end up together? It feels a little magical. When I first saw you, I didn't even notice you." Yi Qianqian pinched his waist when she heard that. Shinjilia dodged with a smile and continued, "But after spending some time together, I realized that you're really interesting. You're much more interesting than you, Lily." "Well, Lily is about to give birth, and you're still thinking about her?" Yi Qianqian's words were obviously sour. Shinjilia pinched her nose and said, "How is that possible? I just can't stand the fact that she's so devoted to Ming. There are thousands of good men in the world. Why does she have to be with Ming? I just don't understand. How do you women's hearts grow?" Yi Qianqian kicked him and said, "I'm different from Lily. If you treat me the way Ming treats Lily, I'll never look back." Shinjilia looked at Yi Qianqian with an aggrieved expression. Yi Qianqian replied earnestly, "I'm serious. I won't look back. It's just like you said. It's hard to find a three-legged toad in the world, but aren't two-legged men everywhere? But you'll never find someone like me. Why do I have to be like you? You've already let me down. Why should I look for someone like you? Am I going to let you down again?" Yi Qianqian snapped. "I'm not a masochist." When Shinjilia heard that, he realized that it made sense. "Qianqian, oh, Qianqian." Shinjilia's heart was filled with both love and hate. "Sometimes, I envy Ming. He's such a jerk and such a wretch. How could he have a silly girl like you, Lily, waiting for him? Maybe he's rich and handsome? I'm also rich and handsome." Shinjilia was indignant. "But you're not as rich and handsome as he is." Yi Qianqian replied matter-of-factly. Shinjilia felt as if his heart had been pierced with 1,000 holes. He weakly retorted, "I'm a good man." That's indeed better than him. Don't worry. I won't let you down." Shinjilia hugged her and said, "If you really run away, I'll really cry." Yi Qianqian leaned on his shoulder and smiled. She looked up at Shinjilia. Sometimes, she couldn't figure it out. His face was so handsome that it was eye-catching. Chapter 1917. However, Yi Qianqian wasn't the only one who couldn't figure it out. She wouldn't be able to figure it out for a long time to come. For the past few days, Yi Qianqian hadn't had a good night's sleep. After chatting with Shinjilia for a while, she drifted off to sleep. In the evening, Shinjilia woke her up for dinner. When she was brushing her teeth and washing her face, she realized that there was a dazzling array of dishes outside. They were all her favorite dishes. After a hearty meal, Yi Zhenhua suddenly had the idea to take them hiking. Cloud Town was not big. There was a famous mountain that the people in the town called Spiritual Mountain. The Spiritual Mountain was called a mountain, but in reality, it was just a slightly higher hill. Because it was the new year, many people came to climb the mountain at night. The mountain was not steep, and some elderly people would come here to climb up and down. Yi Qianqian deliberately changed into a pair of flats, but before she could even get halfway up the mountain, she felt that she was about to give up. Although the mountain was not steep, it was somewhat slippery. There wasn't much concave or convex surface, so if a person was standing on it, they would easily slide down if they weren't careful. Yi Qianqian maintained her posture and didn't dare to move. She looked at her father, who was swaggering above her, and said pitifully, "Dad, I can't move anymore." Yi Zhenhua was obviously full of energy. He turned to look at Yi Qianqian and said with a smile, "You're a young lady, yet you're losing to an old man like me. Hurry up and come up." Bullsh *T. How are you old? You look very young. Yi Qianqian's face was full of disgust, but she still gave him face and crawled a few more times. He was panting and sweating profusely. Shinjilia was the same. He let out a long sigh and said, "Follow closely. Come, I'll pull you." Yi Qianqian reached out and grabbed Shinjilia's hand before walking forward step by step. Yi Zhenhua saw that they were in a good mood. He sighed and said, "In the past, it was always those people who came with their families. I was embarrassed to come alone." Ha ha ha. Yi Zhenhua smiled and looked down. "I haven't been here for a long time. This time, I came with my daughter and son-in-law. It's finally comfortable." Yi Qianqian's heart ached when she heard that. She was busy with work and could only go home a few times a year. In the past, when his grandfather was still around, he still had a companion. Now that Grandpa had passed away, Yi Zhenhua was living alone at home. Yi Qianqian was still a little worried. Fortunately, he was in good health, so Yi Qianqian wasn't afraid that he would suddenly fall ill. Panting, Yi Qianqian used his strength to climb up and called out, "Dad, I'll come home on the weekends to keep you company, okay? Go, I don't need your company." Yi Zhenhua climbed up the mountain and said while panting, "Kingstown is not close to Yuntown. It's almost a 2-hour drive. It's so tiring to go back and forth." "I'm not tired. Forget it. Work hard to get promoted. That's the best way to repay me." Yi Zhenhua smiled. "If you get promoted, I'll be able to show off when I introduce my daughter to others in the future. How great would that be?" His voice was a little sweet, but the back view of him climbing the mountain looked a little frail. All alone. Yi Qianqian pursed her lips and almost burst into tears. She bit her lower lip, and her eyes reddened. Shinjilia silently tightened his grip on her hand and said, "Hurry up and come up." Chapter 19:18. But after thinking about it, she pushed his hand away and said, "Go climb the mountain with my father. I'll do it slowly on my own." "But you're too slow." Shinjilia frowned. "You're crawling like a tortoise. What if you get lost later?" "Impossible." Yi Qianqian glared at him. "Do you think I'm a 3-year-old? The top of the mountain is only so big. How could I possibly get lost? At most, I'll make a phone call. There's no signal on my phone." Shinjilia pulled her along and said, "Let's go." Yi Qianqian was silent for a moment before she suddenly shouted, "Dad, old Shin wants to compete with you." Yi Zhenhua turned around and looked over. He was amused and said, "All right, young man, you'll definitely be faster than me. I won't wait for you. Hurry up and catch up, or you'll be punished." When Shinjilia heard that, he realized that Yi Zhenhua wasn't the least bit worried that Yi Qianqian would get lost or do anything else. With a smug look on her face, Yi Qianqian pushed his hand away and said, "Go on. My father is waiting for you. Just you wait." Shinjilia had no choice but to turn around and climb up. I'm coming. Yi Zhenhua's speed was very fast, and he disappeared in 2 or 3 moves. Shinjilia wasn't slow either. It was obvious that he had great stamina. Even carrying Yi Qianqian wasn't strenuous at all. Now that they were gone, Yi Qianqian was even less inclined to crawl. He took his time climbing up and rested at the same time. After about 10 minutes, he climbed back down again. When he saw Yi Qianqian, Shinjilia had a helpless expression on his face and said, saying that you crawl like a tortoise is too much of a compliment. Yi Qianqian looked at him with a smile. She naturally reached out her hand and said, hold my hand. Shinjilia was almost defeated by her. He dragged her up slowly. After trying her best to reach the top, Yi Qianqian was exhausted. However, as soon as he arrived, he was stunned by the scenery at the top of the mountain. There were many people on the mountain, but the open space was very big. Yi Qianqian looked down. All she could see were beautiful red lanterns and the deep blue sky in the distance that was tinged with pink. Below them were dark blue waves. It seemed to be the sea, but it also seemed to be something else. It was beautiful. However, there was a faint green light that was even more breathtakingly beautiful. Green light? Shinjilia also looked over, and his eyes were filled with amazement. Yi Qianqian suddenly recalled a rumor and said, it's said that if you see the green light and make a wish in time, your wish will definitely come true. With that, Yi Qianqian clasped her hands together tightly and closed her eyes. Her heart was filled with devotion. I hope my father will be healthy and live to a ripe old age. Shinjilia glanced at her before looking at the beam of light not far away. The corners of his lips curled up slightly. Closing his eyes, Shinjilia had a wish. I hope everything goes well. Almost at the same time, both of them opened their eyes. The green light in the distance had already faded away. Yi Qianqian's lips curled into a smile as she turned her head away. Shinjilia also looked over. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. The 7th day of the new year was a special day for Cloud Town. On this day, it was like a small festival. Receiving guests, paying respects to the ancestors and worshipping the gods were all suitable. Shinjilia and Yi Qianqian had prepared their gifts early in the morning and went to the famous house in town. Uncle Blind's house was full of people today. Chapter 1919. They brought all kinds of expensive gifts with them and lined up outside sincerely, hoping that the blind uncle would have his fortune read for them. Shinjilia was shocked when he saw it. Why are there so many people? Yi Qianqian glanced at them, then glanced at Shinjilia with contempt and said, look at how inexperienced you are. Of course, it's because the blind uncle is accurate. Shinjilia had never expected that the blind uncle's appeal would be so much stronger than old Mrs. Shen's. That was true. One was a true immortal, and the other was a demigod. That must be the difference, right? Shinjilia and Yi Qianqian waited outside for a long time. When the line of people dwindled, they finally walked in. As soon as they entered, Shinjilia saw the obviously worn floor tiles and exclaimed, I finally know what it means to have the doors ill broken. In ancient times, wooden houses must have been even worse than this. You're ignorant. Yi Qianqian glanced at him and said, don't you see the doors ill? I see it. The floor tiles looked very dirty, and there were even some wear and tear on them. However, the color of the door sill was very even. I don't know what it's like over there, but here, door sills can't be stepped on. Huh? Why? I don't really understand. Grandpa told me before that the door sill is like the neck of a deity. If you step on the door sill, it's like you're stepping on the neck of a deity. It's not good. Shinjilia had never heard of it before. Now that Yi Qianqian said it, he found it a little novel. Carrying her gifts, she went to find the blind uncle. It was obvious that the blind uncle had been busy the whole day and was very tired. He was sitting in a chair and leaning against it. His eyes were open, but there were no pupils in them. They were just white. Yi Qianqian felt a little scared when she saw him. When she saw the blind uncle's exhausted look, Yi Qianqian hesitated for a moment and said, "Why don't we come back tomorrow?" "Ah, you're here." It was a woman's voice. It was a woman who looked to be in her 40s or 50s. She looked like an auntie hired by the people in town to take care of the blind uncle. She walked over and asked, "Are you Yi Zhenhua's daughter?" Yi Qianqian was a little surprised and asked, "Yeah, how did you know?" The old maid did not answer but looked at the blind uncle. Uncle Blind still had the same expression, but this time, he spoke in a dialect, "Since you're here, come in." She didn't know why, but she had a feeling that he was waiting for her to come. She pulled Shenjilia forward and stood in front of the blind man. She greeted him, "Hello, uncle." Uncle Blind finally propped himself up and said, "Young lad, come." As he spoke, he waved to the front. He spoke in a dialect, so Shenjilia couldn't understand him. Yi Qianqian nudged him and said, "Uncle is calling for you." Shenjilia placed the gift on the table beside him and stepped forward. "Squat down," Uncle Blind said. Yi Qianqian translated, and Shenjilia squatted down. Uncle Blind Man's rough hand touched Shenjilia's face. Shenjilia quickly closed his eyes. His face hurt from the rubbing. But he didn't make a sound. He pursed his lips and closed his eyes. In next to no time, the blind uncle withdrew his hand and said, "Not bad, not bad." Shenjilia understood what she was trying to say. Chapter 1920. Yi Qianqian tugged at him. Shenjilia finally stood up. He felt a little strange. "Lass." The blind uncle's voice sounded like wood rubbing against cement. It was dry, hoarse, and unpleasant to the ears. Yi Qianqian replied, "Yes." "You want to get married?" Yi Qianqian felt goosebumps all over her body. She whispered, "How did you know?" The blind uncle smiled and said, "Don't be nervous. It's fine. I won't harm you." "I know." Yi Qianqian smiled awkwardly. But she was still afraid. "Give me your boyfriend's horoscope." Shenjilia's horoscope? She only knew Shenjilia's date of birth, but she didn't know the hour of his birth. She turned to look at Shenjilia and asked, "When were you born?" "Noon." "Ah, then it's noon." Yi Qianqian quickly reported Shenjilia's horoscope and her own horoscope. Uncle Blind nodded with a serious look on his face. He pinched the fingers of his right hand as if he was calculating something. "It's the 5th day of the 3rd lunar month this year. It's the best day to get married." Yi Qianqian was a little surprised. She squatted down and said, "Uncle, you said that I would face a tribulation when I was 28 years old. Will I still face one now that I'm 28 years old?" When the blind uncle heard this, he chuckled but did not answer directly. Instead, he said, "That depends on your fate and your man's fate." "What does that mean?" Yi Qianqian didn't understand. However, she was a little unwilling, so she asked again, "Can I still have children?" "Fate." Yi Qianqian felt a little defeated. She stood up and frowned. When the old woman next to her saw Yi Qianqian's expression, she said, "Don't be afraid. There is always a solution to any disaster." "Sir, there should be a solution, right? The little girl has brought you a lot of tonics. Her father and grandfather are also very good people. Their ancestors have accumulated good karma." Uncle Blind Man only smiled and said nothing. If there was no sound, then it was the worst sound. Yi Qianqian felt that her bad habit of letting her imagination run wild was about to resurface. She stomped her feet anxiously and looked at Shenjilia. Shenjilia felt like he was listening to a book from heaven. When he saw Yi Qianqian's expression, he asked softly, "What's wrong?" Yi Qianqian's eyes reddened and she asked, "What do you think I'll do if I can't have children in the future?" When Shenjilia heard this, he thought that the blind uncle had said something despairing to her. He felt a little sad, but he looked at Yi Qianqian and enunciated each word clearly, "It doesn't matter. My family doesn't have a throne to inherit. Why would I want a child? As long as we're alive and happy, that's all that matters." Yi Qianqian wanted to cry even more. She asked, but don't you really want a child? Nope, who told you that? Shenjilia looked aggrieved and replied, when did I say that? Sigh, don't let your imagination run wild. If it's not, then it's not. What's important is that we're together. Yi Qianqian couldn't help but tear up. He had clearly said that. In the imperial capital, in the hotel. He told her very clearly that he wanted a child. However, it was very likely that she wouldn't be able to give birth now. What should she do? Besides, it's not up to them to decide whether we can have children or not. We can go to the hospital for a checkup. As long as there's nothing wrong with our bodies, we can definitely have children. Chapter 1921. Yi Qianqian looked at him with reddened eyes and asked, you really don't believe me? Well, this is the era of science. Why do you believe so much nonsense? Shenjilia placed his hand on her shoulder to comfort her. She didn't know if the blind man understood or not, but after Shenjilia finished speaking, he laughed and said, I didn't say anything. Yi Qianqian's mood, which had been on the brink of collapse, seemed to have returned to normal when she heard his laugh. Looking at the blind man, Yi Qianqian asked, Uncle, fate. The blind man still used the same words. Yi Qianqian was even more uncertain. However, no matter how much she asked or said, the blind man refused to reveal a single word. The servant next to her couldn't stand it anymore and said, if the master is willing to say it, then let him say it. If he doesn't want to say it, then he must have his reasons. Young lady, don't ask any more. Although Yi Qianqian was unwilling, she could only give up. In fact, she just wanted to feel at ease. After leaving the blind man's place, when Yi Qianqian and Shenjilia returned home, Yi Zhenhua had already prepared dinner. When he saw them return, he brought out the last dish and said, Tong Tong just came by. Yi Qianqian was stunned when she heard that. Shenjilia asked, what did she come for? She came to look for you. She asked you to go to her shop after dinner if you have time. It was the Lunar New Year period, and many young people had returned home to celebrate the holiday. Fang Tongtong's shop was very popular, so she naturally couldn't leave. Yi Qianqian understood and nodded her head. Okay, I got it. Shenjilia went to the kitchen to wash his hands and took out the bowls and chopsticks. He glanced at Yi Qianqian and asked, are you really going? Yes, I'll go. I'll go alone. You can stay at home. Yi Qianqian looked at him. Shenjilia frowned and said, no way. Didn't something happen to her when she left your house? I'll go with you later. Yi Qianqian felt a little helpless. It's fine. I'll take the main road. There are people coming and going on the main road. What's there to be afraid of? No, Shenjilia refused again. I'll go with you. All right. Yi Qianqian didn't know what to do with him and said, I just think it'll be awkward if we go together. Why is it awkward? Shenjilia asked. He suddenly remembered something and said, by the way, we're getting married. Not this, the last time you broke up with me, I gave Fang Tongtong a call. Shenjilia scooped rice for everyone in the house before finally sitting down. Yi Qianqian blinked. She felt a little strange. What did he mean by breaking up with him? If she hadn't misunderstood his relationship with Fang Tongtong, would she have broken up with him? But he didn't mention it and asked, and then? Then, I think I said some nasty things. If I go, it might be a little awkward. Shenjilia picked up his chopsticks and picked up some food for Yi Qianqian. Let's eat. Yi Qianqian stared at the food in her bowl and asked suspiciously, what did you say? Based on Shenjilia's character, what kind of harsh words could he say? Chapter 1922. Yi Qianqian replied, that's pretty harsh. However, Shenjilia's character wasn't bad. How angry must he be to say something like that? Yi Qianqian glanced at Shenjilia guiltily and lowered her head to eat in silence. As Shenjilia ate, he said, in any case, I don't have a good impression of her anymore. If she wasn't your best friend, would have chased her away a long time ago. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Qianqian with a hint of resentment and said, "Look at you. You invited a wolf into the house and wronged me. I'll remember this for the rest of my life." Yi Qianqian felt even more guilty. She looked up at Shenjilia weakly. Shenjilia looked very unhappy. Even his eating speed had slowed down significantly. When Yi Qianqian saw this, she muttered, "You're a man. Why are you so petty?" Humph. Shenjilia was even more unhappy. "All right." Yi Qianqian reached out and tugged at his hand. "I was wrong, all right? Didn't I admit my mistake later on? Look at how well I'm doing now. I'm like a fairy." Yi Zhenhua laughed out loud and looked at Yi Qianqian with disdain. As he ate, he complained, "You're so thick-skinned." Yi Qianqian stuck out her tongue and looked at Shenjilia pitifully. Shenjilia wasn't really angry. When he saw Yi Qianqian's expression, his expression relaxed a little. He said, "I got it. It's all in the past." Yi Qianqian breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile, "Hubby is the best." Hubby, an unformed marriage. Shenjilia suddenly felt a little intoxicated when he heard those two words. His mood lightened up, but he still kept a straight face and coldly replied. Yi Qianqian had long seen through his thoughts. She laughed and lowered her head to eat. After dinner, Shenjilia escorted Yi Qianqian to the back of the big banyan tree in front of Fang Tongtong's snack shop. He specially reminded her, "When you're ready to go back, you must send me a message or call me. I'll pick you up. Don't come back alone." "Got it." Yi Qianqian pushed him away. "Go back and wash the dishes." Shenjilia had no choice but to turn back 3 times as he walked away. Yi Qianqian walked past the big banyan tree and arrived at Fang Tongtong's door. The sound was very good, and there were many young people coming and going. There were a few motorcycles parked at the entrance. Young men and women were smoking on the motorcycles, talking and laughing. Fashionable and youthful. Yi Qianqian walked over. The men glanced at her and quickly shifted their attention. Fang Tongtong, who was sitting inside, kept her gaze fixed on Yi Qianqian. Fang Tongtong waited until Yi Qianqian was right in front of her before she smiled and said, "You're here." "Yes, I'm coming." "Mom." Fang Tongtong called out and walked inside. "Qianqian, you're here. Come and take care of the shop." "Okay." Mrs. Fang's voice wasn't soft either, and it reached outside. Soon, Mrs. Fang came out. When he saw Yi Qianqian, he seemed a little touched and said, "You're here, Qianqian. Come in and have a seat. I'll take care of things here." Fang Tongtong naturally held Yi Qianqian's hand and said, "Let's go. I brought you a present." Yi Qianqian subconsciously looked at her hand, which was being held by Shenjilia. She felt a little strange. Fang Tongtong noticed Yi Qianqian's gaze and smiled awkwardly. She quickly let go of her hand and said, "Come." Yi Qianqian followed her inside. The familiar layout didn't seem to have changed much over the years. Chapter 1923. Actually, Fang Tongtong's home wasn't here. Instead, it was in the small villa behind. After so many years, the family had been quite well off. However, he spent almost all of his time in this small restaurant, so it naturally became his second home. Inside, there was a sofa, tea set, tables and chairs. After Fang Tongtong walked in, she took out a bag. It looked like a jewelry wrapper. "Here, this is for you." Fang Tongtong sat down on a stool. "What would you like to drink?" "I recently learned how to brew coffee. Do you want a cup?" Yi Qianqian sat down and naturally opened the gift bag in her hand. She said, "No, I won't be able to sleep later. It's been a few days, and I still need to rest." "Ah, are you not feeling well?" "No." Yi Qianqian opened the package and said, "If you want to have a child, you'll have to go to the hospital for a checkup. Fong Tong Tong suddenly felt a little sad when she heard that. He looked at Yi Qianqian and asked, "Are you married?" "Not yet." Yi Qianqian glanced at her. "If I were to get married, wouldn't you know? I still have a wedding to attend." Fong Tong Tong calmed down. She looked at Yi Yu's hand and said anxiously, "Can you do it or not? You've been tearing it apart for so long, but you still can't open it." "Let me do it." "No." Yi Qianqian turned around and avoided her lecherous hand. "Can't you show some sincerity? You're just giving me a present, and you're complaining that I'm taking too long to open it. That's weird." Fong Tong Tong couldn't help but laugh when she heard Yi Qianqian's words of disdain. Yi Qianqian glanced at her and muttered, "Crazy. You're the crazy one. I'm not talking about you. Why do you have to take it personally? Bah, there are only the two of us here. If you don't scold me, why are you scolding the air?" "I'll just curse at the air." "I'm happy to," Yi Qianqian said matter-of-factly. Finally, the packaging was removed. It was indeed a jewelry box. Yi Qianqian opened the box and saw a ruby. The ruby was not small and was made into the shape of a key. There were many diamonds on the key. Yi Qianqian was stunned when she saw it. She looked up at Fong Tong Tong and said, "You've struck it rich. Why did you give her such an expensive gift? Do you want to die?" "I didn't get rich." Fong Tong Tong's smile faded. "I just wanted to apologize to you." "Apologize?" Yi Qianqian looked at the extravagant necklace. The necklace would cost at least tens of thousands of yuan, right? Or, even more expensive? "Yes." Fong Tong Tong looked at Yi Qianqian and said, "I'm sorry about what happened before, Qianqian." Yi Qianqian didn't respond. She stared at the necklace in her hand and nodded her head in satisfaction. She said, "Your apology is very sincere. I like it." "Humph, of course it's enough. I bought this necklace with all my savings over the years." Fong Tong Tong had a pained expression on her face. "Damn it. I can't even bear to buy something so expensive myself." Yi Qianqian closed the lid and looked at Fong Tong Tong earnestly. She said, "Don't worry. I'll treat her well." Fong Tong Tong glared at her, but she quickly smiled. Yi Qianqian looked at her and smiled. She quickly changed the topic. She had originally thought that it would be awkward to meet Fong Tong Tong here. Later on, she realized that no matter what happened, their relationship of more than 10 years was still a relationship. Chapter 1924. Things seemed to be going smoothly. On the night they returned to Kingstown, old Mrs. Shen called Shenjilia. She looked very happy and said, "I've decided on the wedding day. It's on the 5th day of the 3rd month in spring. This is the best day of the year. According to Qianqian's horoscope, it's especially good." When Shenjilia and Yi Qianqian heard the old man's happy words, they looked at each other and smiled. The date that old Mrs. Shen mentioned was the same as the date that Uncle Blind had told them 2 days ago. On the same day. "Okay, got it," Shenjilia replied. On the other hand, old Mrs. Shen was displeased. She said, "What do you mean I know? Aren't you happy that we're getting married so soon?" Shenjilia naturally wouldn't tell her about the blind uncle. Instead, he changed the topic and asked, "Grandma, since you said that it was a good day, how was it a good day?" "Io, Qianqian, the right time and the right place are all favorable to you. Your 8 characters of the 8 trigrams can also set off Qianqian. If you get married on this day, maybe you will have a change of luck." Shenjilia turned on the loudspeaker. Yi Qianqian's eyes lit up when she heard that. What does that mean? Luck? Yi Qianqian suddenly felt a glimmer of hope. The word that the blind uncle had repeated countless times appeared in his mind, fate. If his luck changed at this time, it could also be considered fate, right? Yi Qianqian's mood suddenly lightened up. Really? Shenjilia was ecstatic. Grandma, you're the best. When old Mrs. Shen heard that, she smiled proudly and said, I'm just kidding. Of course I'm great. Oh, right. On the 25th of next month, bring Qianqian back to collect the marriage certificate. Gregorian calendar? Yes, the Gregorian calendar. Shenjilia instinctively walked over to the desk calendar and flipped through it. There's still a month left, he said. That's right. That's not a bad day either. It's the perfect day to get our marriage certificate, old Mrs. Shen said with a smile. I can't talk to you anymore. I'm going to talk to Dongfang. Wait, Grandma. Before he could finish, old Mrs. Shen had already hung up. Shenjilia had no other choice, but when he turned around, a figure pounced on him. Yi Qianqian jumped up and laughed happily. We're getting married. Shenjilia held her firmly in his arms. Yi Qianqian was even more excited. She clasped him and shouted, We're getting married. We're getting married. Old Shen, we can get our marriage certificate next month. Shenjilia carried her back into the room and said, Didn't you say that you didn't care about this ID? How did you change so quickly? Haha. Yi Qianqian hugged his head and looked up happily. How could I not care? You big idiot. Didn't I comfort you at that time? Humph. Shenjilia placed her on the bed, but Yi Qianqian refused to let go of him. His mind was happily fantasizing about his future life. Shenjilia's face reddened, and he said with much difficulty, Let go. Are you trying to murder your husband? Haha. Yi Qianqian released him and kicked off her shoes. She took off her jacket and laid on the bed with her phone in her hand. She opened the browser. Shenjilia removed his jacket and pinned her down from behind as he asked, What are you doing? Yi Qianqian stared at the phone and asked, Let me check what we need to prepare for our wedding. Are we going to do a premarital checkup? Yeah. We'll do it tomorrow. Shenjilia hugged her from behind. His hand slid under her shirt, and his other hand took away her phone. There's no rush. Leave the checkup to me. Yi Qianqian turned her head, and Shenjilia quickly covered her lips with his. Chapter 1925. On her first day back at work, Yi Qianqian applied for leave. Although the chief editor wasn't happy, when she heard that she was going for a premarital checkup, she didn't object. Yi Qianqian and Shenjilia arrived at the hospital early. After registering, they went straight for the checkup. After a series of tests, Yi Qianqian was very nervous. They couldn't get the report right away, so Shenjilia and Yi Qianqian went home after the checkup. After staying in Kingstown for 2 days, Shenjilia returned to the capital. Yi Qianqian went to work alone. She insisted on going to bed early and waking up early every day. She didn't know if it was an illusion, but she found that her skin looked much better. When she got the report, Yi Qianqian immediately took it out. However, she wasn't in a hurry to read it. Instead, she called Shenjilia. Shenjilia seemed to be busy. It took a long time for him to pick up. It was very quiet on the other end. Shenjilia said softly, Give me 10 minutes. Okay. Yi Qianqian immediately hung up. She stared at the report in front of her and took a deep breath before flipping it open. She read through everything. Everything was normal. Negative. Normal. Yi Qianqian read it over and over again. Her original nervousness disappeared. She took photos of every page and sent them to Shenjilia's phone. After about 5 minutes, Shenjilia called back. Yi Qianqian picked up and said excitedly, I got the report. I saw it. Shenjilia seemed to be in a good mood. He said, All the tests are normal. There's nothing different. Haha. Does it prove that my body is healthy? Yeah. Did you get the report on the uterus that day? Yeah. I sent it to you. Yeah. Shenjilia smiled sincerely and said, Everything is normal. Everything is normal. You're healthy. Yi Qianqian fell into the chair. She laughed excitedly and said, Old Shen, I miss you so much. I miss you too. Shenjilia looked at the calendar. Soon. Remember to bring your household register and ID card. We're going to the Civil Affairs Bureau. Oh my, Old Shen is getting married? A colleague next to him overheard and immediately began to tease him. Yi Qianqian heard it too. She didn't mind and said, Tell your colleague that there will be wedding candies. Shenjilia smiled. He glanced at the man and said, Don't worry. You'll get plenty of red packets. Yi Qianqian burst out laughing and said, Go ahead. I have to get back to work. Wait for me. Phew, sure, Shenjilia replied. He only put down the phone after Yi Qianqian hung up. He turned around and continued to busy himself. Yusho. The new year had just ended, and the surroundings were still immersed in the festive atmosphere. Su Qianxi helped Nanny Rong make desserts for the children. Standing next to the stove, she slowly stirred the sugar in the pan. The small fire simmered slowly, and the fragrance permeated the air. Li Jianhui ran around with little Su and shouted in a crisp voice, Mommy, little Su smelled the fragrance too. She's so happy. Su Qianxi smiled and was about to speak, but suddenly, she felt a pain in her belly. The pain came suddenly. She frowned and slightly bent down. Nanny Rong saw this and asked in surprise, Madam, what's wrong? Su Qianxi's face quickly paled. My stomach hurts. Nanny Rong was even more shocked. She quickly turned off the fire and supported her. Are you going to give birth? Come, sit on the sofa. Chapter 1926. Hearing Ursu's words, Nanny Rong frowned and said, It's not as simple as a stomachache. Hurry up and call your father. Li Jianhui had never seen Nanny Rong so serious before. She was shocked and said, Oh, I'll go right now. Su Qianxi's situation looked bad. Her waist was slightly arched, and her belly was bulging. Her face looked a little pale, and she was holding a spoon in her hand. Nanny Rong took the spoon from Su Qianxi's hand and put it down. Then she helped Su Qianxi to sit on the sofa. Su Qianxi's belly was swollen and painful, and she held it uncomfortably. Nanny Rong knew that she was really going to give birth. She looked at Ursu and saw that she was calling Li Xicheng. Li Xicheng quickly picked up. Ursu turned on the speaker and said in a crisp voice, Hello, Dad, Nanny Rong asked me to call you. She said that Mom has a stomachache. Li Xicheng was preparing for the meeting. When he heard this, he was stunned and said, Your mother has a stomachache? Yes. Ask Nanny Rong if Mom is going to give birth. Yes. Nanny Rong couldn't stand it anymore and shouted, Sir, come back quickly. Madam looks very uncomfortable. Come back quickly and take her to the hospital. In the president's office of the LS Group, Qingyu walked in with the meeting materials and knocked on the door. Li Xicheng had just hung up the phone, and then he picked up his coat and said, The meeting is postponed. Qingyu was stunned and asked, Why? My wife is giving birth. Almost flying out, Li Xicheng soon disappeared. Qingyu was surprised and said, Susu is going to give birth again? She picked up her phone and called Rong Rui. After all, he was Su Qianxi's cousin, so it was necessary to inform him. She went to the conference room to inform them of the situation. Everyone expressed their blessings and then left. When Li Xicheng returned home, he ran in. Seeing Su Qianxi leaning on the sofa, he said, Honey, I'm back. Su Qianxi glanced at Li Xicheng and said with some grievance, Mr. Li, it hurts. Li Xicheng quickly walked forward, pushed Nanny Rong aside, and then went forward to carry Su Qianxi. Nanny Rong, take Ursu with you. Mosen is still inside. Nanny Rong hesitated. However, Ursu looked excited and said, Is Mommy going to give birth to a little brother? She's a little girl. He corrected her and quickly carried her out. Opening the car door, Li Xicheng thought for a moment and said, Ursu, you stay at home with Granny Rong and Xiao Su. I'll take your mother to the hospital. Li Jianhua looked a little disappointed, but she still pouted and said, all right then. Daddy has to take good care of mommy. Of course. Li Xiqing touched his daughter's head and said, Daddy is leaving. Su Qianxi's face was pale, which made Li Xiqing feel sorry for her. He started the car and drove straight in the direction of the first maternity hospital. When she arrived at the hospital, she looked much better. He got out of the car and hugged her. Does it still hurt? Su Qianxi shook her head and said, it's not that painful. Chapter 1927. The pain of a pregnant woman was sometimes heavy and sometimes light. Just lying on the bed, Su Qianxi felt an unbearable swelling pain again. It was the first time that Li Xiqing had seen her give birth so closely. His lips tightened in fear and he said, Doctor, hurry up. My wife has a stomachache. The nurse was a bit speechless, but she still said in a good attitude, that's what women do when they give birth. They'll be fine after they give birth. When can she give birth? I don't know yet. Her water hasn't broken yet. I guess it'll take a while. How long? Li Xiqing was a bit loud. The nurse looked at Li Xiqing and said, Mr. Li, it depends on the pregnant woman. It's not up to us to decide. Some people have to give birth for a few days, but others have to give birth immediately. Give birth immediately? A cesarean section? A cesarean section is also an option, but I recommend you to have a natural birth. After all, your wife had a cesarean section before, and they also gave birth here. Therefore, the nurse was very clear. When Su Qianxi gave birth for the first time, this man was not by her side at all. The way she looked at Li Xiqing was also a bit strange. Li Xiqing nodded as if he was thinking. Su Qianxi was lying on the bed, looking very pale. Mr. Li, please stay here with your wife. If anything happens, just press the service bell. What do you mean? The nurse held back her laughter and said, for example, the pregnant woman can't stand the pain, or her water breaks, or any other emergency. You can go out. Su Qianxi's voice rang out. Let my husband stay here. The nurse felt relieved and said, okay, call me if anything happens. After the nurse left, Li Xiqing sat on the edge of Su Qianxi's bed. Su Qianxi looked at her husband, feeling both amused and distressed. She reached out and touched his face. His first child was already absent. This time, he was nervous and flustered, and Su Qianxi saw all of it. Don't be nervous. It's not that painful, she comforted him. Li Xiqing suddenly laughed. Why are you comforting me now? Humph. Su Qianxi's face was pale, but she was in good spirits. Look at yourself. Can you comfort me now? Li Xiqing caught her hand and kissed it gently. Don't I look bad now? Su Qianxi smiled and said, no, my husband is always the most handsome. Li Xiqing curled his lips and looked at her belly. His stomach looked round. It was huge. However, compared to the first twin, it was undoubtedly much smaller. Bite me if it hurts. He looked at her with concern. Your lips are blue. Of course not. It's over if my lips turn blue. Su Qianxi's mental state was not bad, but suddenly, it began to hurt again. Don't talk. Save your energy. He held her hand and sat next to her. Su Qianxi's heart was warm. At least this time he was by her side. After another 2 hours of pain, Su Qianxi's water broke, and the doctors and nurses sent her to the delivery room. After a series of procedures and disinfection, Li Xiqing could enter the delivery room. Chapter 1928. At that moment, Li Xiqing's mind was blank. But at the same time, he felt that his life was complete. It was as if he could feel every inch of Su Qianxi's pain. But it was so far away, and he wished that he could replace her and let all the pain fall on himself. She did not give birth until it was very, very late in the evening. It was a natural birth. Su Qianxi's face was pale and relaxed, but Li Xiqing felt that he had been tortured to the core. Holding Su Qianxi's hand, Li Xiqing did not speak for a long time. Hubby. Yeah. I'm hungry. She sounded aggrieved and faint. Li Xiqing suddenly smiled when he heard that. Nanny Rong is here. Li Xiao and Qin Shuhua were waiting at the door of the delivery room. Nanny Rong sat with Mosen and Desu until the door of the delivery room opened. Almost at the same time, everyone stood up and carried a chubby boy. It's a boy, 6 and 2 pounds. Great. Qin Shuhua laughed excitedly. She went forward and carefully carried the child over. How is the adult? Li Xiao asked. Is my son in there too? Yes, but he's about to be transferred to another ward. He'll be out soon. The nurse smiled and reminded them of the precautions. Li Xiao actually did not understand these things, but Qin Shuhua nodded. Mosen turned his head and looked at Ursu. He said, Mommy gave birth to a little brother. Yeah, I heard that. Is the brother called Sansu? Qin Shuhua laughed and said, he's called Little Moyun. Little Moyun, Big Mosen. Yay! Li Jianhua cheered and took out her little phone. I'm going to call brother. If he hears this good news, he'll be very happy. Nanny Rong looked at the children and said with a smile, by the way, tell your grandparents not to worry. Both mother and child are safe. Yeah. Li Jianhua made the call happily, feeling that she had been entrusted with an important task. She called Li Jianxian, and he picked up very quickly. Brother. A crisp voice sounded. When Li Jianxian heard that, his originally unhappy face softened a little. He said, yeah. Brother, let me tell you, Mom gave birth to a little brother today. Grandma said his name is Little Moyun, and brother Mosen is Big Mosen. Li Jianhua smiled and asked, Brother, what are you doing? However, Li Jianxian didn't reply. Instead, he quickly changed the topic and said, Little Moyun is born. Have you told Grandpa and Grandma? No, brother. I miss you so much. Li Jianhua pouted. Brother, when are you coming back? Li Jianxian lay on the small bed and looked at the photo not far away. He whispered, I just came from Kingstown. Then, big brother, when are you coming back? Wait for the holidays. Then, big brother, when are you going to have a holiday? Let's wait for brother to graduate. Li Jianxian looked at his little desk, which was filled with all kinds of junior high school textbooks and questions. I want to go back and see Little Moyun too. I didn't see it either. I'll go and take a photo of Little Moyun and send it to you. All right. Just you wait. Li Jianxian removed the phone from his ear and ran towards Qin Shuhua. Grandma, I want to take a photo of the little brother and send it to brother. Looking at Li Jianhua's expression, Li Mosen suddenly thought of a phrase, 2 innocent children. Ursu and Desu's relationship was too close, and the time they spent together couldn't compare to the strong familial love between them. Chapter 1929. Qin Shuhua helped Li Jianhua take a few photos of Little Moyun's face and then handed the phone to Li Jianhua. Li Jianhua happily sent the photos over and then used WeChat to send a voice message to her brother. Brother, I think Little Moyun doesn't look like us at all. We look much better. Li Jianxian didn't reply. In the capital. Li Jianxian looked at the ceiling above his head and was slightly distracted. Even when the phone next to him rang, he ignored it. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Li Jianxian immediately sat up and became alert. Come in. As soon as the childish voice fell, the sound of the door being opened was heard. Rong Xian walked in and looked at Li Jianxian before closing the door. Hello, Grandma. Desu. Rong Xian walked over and sat down on Li Jianxian's little bed. Li Jianxian's lips were tightly pursed. I'm sorry, Grandma. Rong Xian looked at the child and sighed. Your mother gave birth today. It's a little brother, so I didn't tell your father about you. However, you really shouldn't have hit your classmate like that. I was wrong. Li Jianxian lowered his head and was very honest. You are different from Chu. Chu's parents have always been abroad and don't care about him. I know that you are close to him, but I think it's better for you to keep a distance from him. Rong Xian looked at Li Jianxian and said seriously. When Li Jianxian heard this, he looked up and looked at her in surprise. Grandma, we hit him today because Wang Xingbin came to provoke us. Li Jianxian's little face was a little unconvinced. He said that Chu was an unwanted child and that I was a little monster raised by an old witch. After we hit him, he even spat on us. I was very angry, so you hit your classmate until his teeth fell out and his face was swollen. He might even have a concussion. Rong Xian was a little angry. Li Jianxian, what did Grandma usually teach you? A gentleman uses his fists, not his mouth. Not only did you hit him, but you also hit him until he was hospitalized. As she spoke, she looked at Li Jianxian with some disappointment and said, You weren't like this in the past, Daisu. It's all because of Yu Chulin. Grandma, no. Yu Chulin used to have violent tendencies. He looks quiet, but he's actually mentally deficient. His father has mania, so it's best if you don't hang out with him anymore. Li Jianxian couldn't believe that Rong Xian would say such a thing. Grandma, okay, don't talk about it anymore. Come with me to the hospital tomorrow to apologize to her. Rong Xian stood up and looked at him. If a fool is scolding you, just ignore him. Treat him as a mute, treat him as a lunatic. It's his family's problem if he's not educated, but if you hit him, it's your fault. Li Jianxian was not convinced. He pursed his lips and did not speak. Rong Xian bent down and put her hands on Li Jianxian's shoulders. Daisu, you are still Grandma's good boy. Go to bed early. Good night. Chapter 1930. Daisu, it's because you're friends with him that you chose to believe him. Rong Xian looked at Li Jianxian and said, I know you won't listen to anything I say now, but Grandma has to warn you. Don't contact him anymore. Do you hear me? Grandma, I don't agree. Calm down first. School will start in a few days. You have to prepare well. Grandma, I want to skip a grade. You have to talk to your father about this. Rong Xian looked at Li Jianxian and said, Go to sleep. Good night. The door to the room was closed. Li Jianxian looked at the dark surroundings and suddenly felt a little sad. Mom, I want to go home. Li Siqing carried the child until late at night. The newborn's body was as soft as a piece of cotton. He held it carefully, afraid that he would hurt the child. Qin Shuhua watched from the side, and her heart was in her throat. She said, Slow down. Slow down. Li Siqing was already nervous, and after hearing Qin Shuhua's reminder, he felt even more uncomfortable. Su Qianxi had fallen asleep, but when she heard the movement in front of the bed, she woke up again. Seeing that Li Siqing didn't dare to move, she smiled and said, Don't be afraid. Her voice was very soft. Li Siqing quickly came over and smiled at Su Qianxi. Then, the child in his arms began to struggle. His little hands and feet flailed, and his wrinkled face turned slightly red. Then, he opened his mouth and burst into tears. Li Siqing's body stiffened and he asked, Why are you crying? Are you hungry? Qin Shuhua heard that and said, Hurry up and carry the child to Qianqian. Feed him. Oh, okay. Li Siqing carefully carried the child over and said, Honey, feed him. Su Qianxi slowly sat up, and Qin Shuhua went up to help her. Li Siqing handed the child to her. When Su Qianxi took it, she could clearly feel the man's hand tremble slightly. Don't be afraid. The child is very strong. But this adult had scared the hell out of him. After feeding the child milk, little Moyun instinctively sucked on the milk and closed his eyes in satisfaction. But after a while, he began to cry again. Su Qianxi touched his diaper and found that it felt a little wrong. She said, Does the baby need to change his diaper? Take a look. Li Xiqing hurried forward to hold her and said, diaper change, Mom. Qin Shuhua had just walked out to coax her granddaughter. Hearing his voice, she immediately responded, What's up? Please tell me to change my diaper. Qin Shuhua almost laughed and said, Wait a minute. Li Jianhua walked forward and stared at him with her big, round eyes. Daddy, are you going to change little brother's diaper? Yes, Ursu, go out first. It will stink. Li Jianhua's eyes were wide open, but her eyelids were starting to drool. She said, I'm not afraid of the stench. I want to take a video and send it to my brother. It's a video of Daddy changing my little brother's diaper. Li Xiqing's expression changed. He coughed softly and said, What's there to see? Don't take pictures, Mosen. Li Mosen responded from outside. Take your sister out. Let Granny Rong take you home to sleep. It's getting late. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.